Ahlan wa sahlan, and if you're joining us from the other parts of the world, please do greet us in the chat box. We would love to welcome you. And today we have an amazing array of presenters, 29 presenters for you. So just pick up the schedule and see which one interests you, which is good for your professional development, and you can just click on the schedule and enter the hall 1 or hall 2. So today, this morning, you are with me in hall 1. My name is Mary, and the first presenter for the day would be Ms. Narjes Ahmed Salman. And Mrs. Narjes is a colleague at the English Language Center, University of Bahrain, and she has wide experience teaching tertiary education students. And Ms. Narjes will be presenting under the theme of COVID-19 Youth Employability and Future Skills Development. So please welcome Mrs. Narjes Ahmed Salman, who will be presenting on the impact of a pandemic on education sector, perspective of Kingdom of Bahrain. Mrs. Narjes, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and good morning to all of you. Let me just thank everybody for giving me this great chance to be one of the presenters in this great event. And I'm going to be sharing my screen so you can see the presentation, and we can start with that. I hope that you can see the screen. Well,
yes, it's clear. Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning again to everyone. Today I'm going to be presenting a paper that was done back in June. Well, actually it was finished back in June, and some changes have occurred since the the beginning of this paper. Today I'm going to be talking about the impact of the coronavirus, or what is known by COVID-19 pandemic, on the educational and the economic sector. But today my focus is going to be only on the educational sector in Bahrain and how it has affected that. To start with, of course, everybody now knows what the pandemic is known as and what is it. It's a disease that is affected the respiratory system, and it is one of the families of the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. As well as everybody knows that the disease was first identified in December in China, in Wuhan, and then it became a public health emergency of international concern in January 2020, and of course it impacted the whole world. To start with, I have gone through a lot of literature regarding the pandemic and regarding the effect of the pandemic. And I'm going to be presenting to you some of the positives and negative impact of the COVID through the literature review that I'm going to be sharing with you today. But specifically, it will include the impact on Bahrain in general, and on the economic, sociocultural, and the educational, sector in particular in this paper. This study was conducted actually initially to assess the emergence of the issue mentioned, which is the COVID, and the impact of that to the country, with the ultimate goals of creating initiatives that will respond to the same issue. Some of the literature review that I have, went through says, I mean, I wish that I can be pronouncing the names correctly, because, some of them are just like, I don't know, difficult to pronounce. Burgess and Severston in 2020 have stated that Going to school is the best public policy tool available to raise skills, and this is something that no one would ever disagree upon. And he also says that school time can be fun, can raise social skills and awareness. This is something that everybody agreed on, that even learning does not only happen in the classroom, but it happens also in the other premises of schools, interacting with classmates, teachers, and so on. And also by doing that, it would definitely increases the child's ability, which has been affected nowadays in the sense of the online classes. Carlson also has added that even a relatively short period of missed school will have consequences for the skill growth. This is something that everybody can agree on and will never ignore. And undoubtedly, of course, COVID interruption will affect learning as well. There will be always a substantial disparities between families in terms of in the extent to which they can help their children to learn, and this is what everybody was freaking about at the beginning of the spread of the pandemic. And some of the key differences that Oriopolis in 2016 has discussed is, first of all, people were worried about, or parents in particular were worried about, the amount of time available that they devote to the teaching of their children. This is one of the concerns that the parents had. And also one of the important thing is that the non-cognitive skills of the parents. As a parent, I will not be able to teach my kids, or I will not be owning all of the skills needed by my kids. Like, I will not be able to teach or to assess my kids in every single subject. I would always lack some knowledge, in particular part. So the amount of knowledge of parents also was an issue in order to be, assessing their children in, teaching, in making learning happen to them, and so on. Morphy and Wyans have stated also that the closure of schools and colleges and universities interrupted the teaching of children around the world, and this is a fact that happened, and the whole world has stopped for a while to think about what could be happen, and everybody were worried about the learning and whether it's going to be done the right way or not. And of course, that coincides with a critical assessment period. When the first pandemic, spread, it was a very critical period of assessments, and in many parts of the world, many exams have been postponed or even canceled. And everybody knows that the point of any test or any assessment is to give the information about the child progress for families and for teachers. And if this is, is not available, then that would create also a problem. So losing that kind of information will delay the recognition of both high potentials and learning difficulties. If my kid has, or talented kid, or has any special potentials, of course, in such situation, it'll be very difficult for me to get to know these, potentials, or on the other hand, the learning difficulties that my child would be suffering from, of course, and that would be having, or would be affecting on the long run, and would have many consequences on the long run. Now, the aim of my study was what? It was to study the ultimate goal of to establish the empirical data regarding the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in the Kingdom of Bahrain, as well as specifically the assessment was done at the education sector's a grassroots level, implicating the economic milo, and to measure the impact of the COVID-19 on those both sectors. But as I said previously, we're going to be focusing on the educational sector for this paper today. The study covered most of the school age students of both public and private schools, universities, and as well as students' parents were also included in this study. Now, I've had 3 objectives for this study. The first objective is to determine and analyze the impact, which we're going to be focusing at in this presentation due to the lack of time. And, you know, I will try my best to make it clear, of COVID-19 pandemic on the educational sector in the Kingdom of Bahrain in terms of socioeconomic perspective. I have 2 other objectives, which we're going to be like referring to today, which is to determine the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the colleges and universities in terms of enrollment figures, as well as to evaluate the proposed government directives in response to the COVID-19 pandemic for the educational sector in Bahrain again. Methodology that I have used in this paper is that descriptive survey was designed using both quantitative and qualitative are the primary methodologies that were employed, and they were done to determine the impact of COVID-19 excuse me, in the Kingdom of Bahrain. And we as researchers had tailored the survey questionnaire that is going to be utilized, or that was utilized in this paper, and to collect the information. And the survey questionnaire contained both close-ended and open-ended question. Actually, it had only 2 open-ended questions, and were subject, of course, to the validity testing before the administration. I'm not going to go through this. Okay. Okay. Of course, the validity of this questionnaire was undertaken by experts in the field, such as teachers and economists. And of course, due to face-to-face restrictions, the survey questionnaire was distributed online. And the results were presented using descriptive statistics, such as frequencies and percentages. And the transcripts of responses from the open-ended questions, of course, are presented using qualitative analysis. A random sample was invited to participate in the self-constructed survey to collect primary data about the population awareness level of COVID-19 impact, their attitude towards it. The questionnaire included 22 questions, and the SPSS was employed for the analysis of the numerical data collected from 205 individuals who participated in the survey, which was uploaded on Google Documents. I'm going to be going through the results that I have found, but before that, let me just give you or brief you about the educational system, especially people who are, you know, attending.
لسه البرزنتيشن بتاعي متأخر.
I think. Okay, I'm going to be going through or brief you about the educational system in Bahrain, especially for those attendees who are attending this conference from the outside of Bahrain. The system in Bahrain, or the educational, or I would say the formal educational in Bahrain, or the public education in Bahrain, started back in 1919 by opening the first boys' school, Al-Hidayah Al-Khalifiyya school in Muharraq, followed by another school that was opened for boys school as well in 1926. Followed by the first primary school that was opened for girls in 1928, which was also opened in Muharraq. The United Nations in 2020 have stated that school-age children must attend either public or private schools, as education is compulsory in Bahrain. Children with disabilities, of course, participate in particular institutions that are, that are specified for them. And the Ministry of Education, of course, will provide or is providing free education for Bahrainis and non-Bahrainis. That includes free textbooks for every subject for all Bahraini and non-Bahraini students in public schools only. public school in Bahrain is segregated, where boys and girls are separated, whereas some schools would be having female administrative staff, and those normally schools that are, and some of them, not all of them, and those schools are for grades only 1 to 6. And of course, segregation is offered among private schools, or I would say some of the private schools that are available in Bahrain. And of course, all the Kingdom universities are co-educationals. Basic educational has 3 levels: the primary level and the intermediate level, and then the secondary level. The tertiary education in Bahrain is categorized into 2 kinds: the degree and non-degree programs offered in colleges and universities, and TVET schools, or training, vocational and educational and training schools. In 2018, there were 14 reported private schools in Bahrain, adding to the only national university in Bahrain, which is University of Bahrain. And UNESCO has reported at the beginning of the pandemic that 900 million learners have been affected by the educational institutions closure, putting in mind that I have done this study at the beginning of the breakout of the pandemic. COVID-19 has had impact on so many things, such as the social mobility, where schools closed and called for social isolation, and I think it's still running. Hicks has stated that he found that these closures are done, of course, intentionally to prevent the spread of the virus within institutions and prevent the carriage to vulnerable individuals, who are eventually resulting in the widespread socioeconomic implications. The government support for those schools in terms of electricity and salaries of Bahraini teachers continued for 3 months. That is at the beginning of the pandemic. And then it continued for, I think it is continuing until December 2020. The government provides, of course, or has provided financial support packages to reduce the negative impacts and to revive the economy in the current economic crisis. At the beginning of the pandemic, 4 billion BD financial packages were launched in March 17 to support both the public and the private sectors in the country. And in April 2020, doubled the size of the liquidity fund for the period of 6 months too, which has reached 200 million dinars, were also launched. All countries, of course, in such pandemic, all countries will be faced with 2 dilemmas or 2 problems that the policymakers will be faced with. It's either to reduce the contact and then to save lives, or to allow the workers to work and the economy and to maintain the economy. Of course, this was, supported by Carlson when he said that even a relatively short period of missed school will have consequences for skill growth as well. So this situation, particularly focusing on the educational sector, was a really crucial decision that was faced by the policymakers at the beginning of the crisis, whether to save lives or whether to save the economy. The results also that were confirmed by Dalton when he said that the WHO declared that the number of cases has exceeded 120,000 on March 11th. That is, of course, at the beginning of the breakdown of the pandemic. Mayers and Thompson stated that, or that differentiated between the 2 terms, the epidemic and the pandemic, because at the beginning people were like confused, is it a pandemic, epidemic or a pandemic? Everybody knows that an epidemic is an outbreak of a disease within one country or within one certain population, whereas the pandemic will be spreading in multiple areas or regions or countries, as the COVID did to the whole world, and it has impacted the whole world. Let me just go through some important dates in regard to the impact of the COVID in Bahrain. Starting with the 21st of February, Bahrain has confirmed the first COVID-19 case, which was for a bus driver coming from Iran via Dubai. And in 25th of February of the same month, the suspension of all educational facilities in Bahrain first came into effect, whereas in February 27th, the ministry followed the 2 weeks of study suspension. That was the plan that was initially done to contain the impact and to contain the consequences of the and to study the situation better. But in March 29th, Bahrain then confirmed the extension of the suspension of all private and public schools and universities and kindergartens and all educational entities as a precautionary measure. Now, in April 5th, the government executive committee chaired by His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, Crown Prince, Deputy Supreme Commander, and the first Deputy Prime Minister announced the following. He announced that educational and administrative bodies in public and private schools, higher education institutions, and kindergartens to allow only 70% of employees to telecommute until further notice, making sure that the services in the kingdom are provided to the citizens are so safe. Students and instructors, of course, are to continue their studies from home. And the results have found that, the results have been found similar to the arguments raised by Lavi in 2015, when he estimated that the impact on learning of differences in instructional time across countries. Mayors in Simpson agreed with him by saying that there are very substantial differences between countries in teaching hours, for no doubt. Now let's just focus on the online classes and the University of Bahrain situation. Now the online classes, Jessica in 2020 has said that the COVID pandemic or the COVID-19 pandemic and the campus closure have ensured and could pose significant enrollment and financial challenges to colleges and universities, for no doubt. That is what the 27th of February was considered a turning point in the Bahrain country, as homeschooling is an enormous shock to the parents, to the students' productivity and children's social life and learning. So both families and educational entities are forced to form a type of adoption to the new reality that they have to deal with until further notice. Now, the biggest concern was maintaining students. As a faculty, we have this biggest, concern to maintain the students staying engaged and focused for the whole class. Seemed to be a very challenging and, and a very, very difficult thing to do. Putting in mind, of course, that the students will be sitting at home and surrounded by all sorts of distractions. All right, and Caulfield argued that the teaching and student assessment has moved online without much ado, and this is what happened in the Bahraini experience, in the educational Bahraini experience. And NAR says also that many assessments have simply been cancelled in some countries. Talking about the University of Bahrain, many obstacles were faced by both the faculty and the students. I'm talking about only at the very first beginning of the outbreak of the pandemic, and then in no time, all accustomed to the situation and all necessary adjustments were made to fit and continue the process. And we as faculty, we assume that high expectations of students' withdrawal from many subjects were put in mind, but to everybody's surprise, the withdrawal rate from subjects and from courses were almost none. And the university is using, or has used and still using, two online platforms, the Blackboard Ultra and the Microsoft Teams at the beginning. And Zoom also is used as well for conferences, for workshops as well. And they are both available for students and for faculty free of charge. Now, the university has adopted two options that is talking about the second semester of the last academic year. And it is one of the plans that the university has done to contain the negative effects of the impact. And they've launched two options for the students to choose from. Option A, which is the pass and fail, in which the theoretical content will be delivered electronically. Students has to finish a coursework which is equal to 60%, and then the pass will be if the accumulative mark are similar. Okay, how much time do I have? I can't hear you.
We have about a couple of minutes, Ms. Narjes.
Okay, so I'll just go through the results very quickly. So this was the first option, and the second option was the option B, and it was given to the practical, the practical subjects. Let me just go through some of the results that I have found. Unfortunately, I mean, time has really seemed very tight. Some of the results that I have found is that female were the biggest number of respondents, and 30 to 40 years old were also the higher respondents. Private school have participated more than public schoolers, and at the beginning, the current effect of the pandemic was higher than than the other part. And 70%, 75% of the participants were using online platform, which is very promising. And the online method, when we compared the online method with the traditional method, it gave us only 2.6 out of 5 mean. Those are some of the results that I have found. Let me just take you through this one also. This is when, when the participants were asked about the education, whether it's provided to them during the pandemic or not. I mean, 75% of them says yes, it was given to them. These are some of the challenges that students That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Narjes. That is a very,
Thank
very
you so much.
relevant and a pertinent subject, and it is so applicable because I think all the countries worldwide could relate to it. We would like to take some questions from the audience, if it's possible. One question from Dr. Tamim Ansari here. Although the impact of pandemic on the learning patterns of the students causes a certain degree of concern, it is not to be viewed as negative. So the question is, how we, the teachers, the administrators in the education sector could cope up with this and be prepared with more interactive strategies to engage with inquisitive minds. Would you like to take?
Yeah, well, not to forget that the role of the university was a great role also in preparing their faculties and their administrative and they contained the whole pandemic outbreak in a very, very, very strategic way, in which many preparations, many workshops, and still going on also to prepare both the faculty and the students at the same time, so they can interact and they can contain the negative impact of that. And I think by now everybody is accustomed, and everybody is have created a system, whether a faculty or a student.
Thank you so much. Another question is, what about parents? Do you think that parents were able to reduce their gap of monitoring their children in terms of their academic progress now that during the pandemic that they are at home and most of the parents also work remotely?
I do believe that, well, I don't have young children as well, but I mean, from my own experience, I do believe that, the system that is employed in Bahrain, the online system, would really, I would create some kind of system for students to be living the experience, the real experience, as they are, attending a regular class. So I think, those problems were really a minority, and they were faced by parents only at the very first phase of the pandemic. But then all have made, according to the results that I have also, all have made the necessary changes to adapt to the new system of the online. And I think, those problems are very, very, minor and not to mention.
Thank you, Ms. Narjes, for that. We have a question from Dr. Muna Al-Kuz, who asks, some academics believe that COVID-19 shall leave, but virtual learning shall stay. What is your take?
Well, no one can ignore the, the physical contact and the impact of the physical contact between, faculties and students, and the great role of that. So this is a very crucial and controversial, thing to be discussed. But I think we've done well in the online, and we're going to be doing well also in the face-to-face, situation.
Thank you, Mrs. Narjes. Now, what would you, from your presentation and from your research, what would be your biggest takeaway? What would you like to share with us? The insight that you would like to share with us?
Well, one of the things that I have came up with is that we as humans should be prepared for any, situation, or for any critical situation that could happen any minute. And we should be prepared, well prepared. Like, at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was shocked that the education is going to be stopped, and students will stay at home without any education, and the whole world is going to be frozen. But to our surprise, none of this happened, and the life really continued. So we as human would always modify things to serve the right purpose at the end. Thank you so much.
Well said, Narjes. Thank you very much. We have been honored to have you to share your research with us, and I'm sure that all of us benefited. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this chance again, and have a good day. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And same to you.